You know that feeling when you watch someone confidently walk toward a cliff and they're explaining to you why gravity doesn't apply to them? That's Germany's energy policy for the last 2 decades. Except the cliff was real, the fall was predictable, and now Europe's largest economy is wondering why the ground feels so hard. Here's the thing most people get wrong about Germany's energy crisis. They think it started in February 2022 when Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine. That's the moment everyone points to. But this video isn't about a war, it's about a bet. A decades long wager that cheap gas would always flow, that nuclear was too scary to keep, and that windmills could power the engine room of Europe. Spoiler alert, that bet lost. Germany didn't stumble into this crisis. Germany built the road that led here, paved it with good intentions, and then seemed genuinely surprised when it ended exactly where the map said it would. Let's rewind. In the early 2000s, Germany had a plan. A beautiful, ambitious, morally righteous plan called the Energiewende, energy transition. The idea was elegant: phase out nuclear because Chernobyl still haunted European nightmares, pivot hard toward renewables, and use cheap Russian natural gas as the bridge fuel while solar and wind scaled up. On paper, genius. In practice, well, you're watching this video, so you can probably guess how that turned out. They subsidized wind farms, they built pipelines directly to Russia. They passed laws mandating nuclear plant closures. And for a while, it worked. German factories hummed along on some of the cheapest energy in Europe. The chemicals industry thrived. The car manufacturers expanded. Politicians collected awards at climate conferences. Everyone was happy. Everyone except the people running the math. The math said, you're building a system with a single point of failure. Fukushima happened in 2011. Thousands of miles away, in Japan, a tsunami triggered a nuclear disaster. Germany's response? Immediately shut down 7 reactors and accelerate the exit from nuclear entirely. Not because German reactors were on a fault line, not because German reactors were the same design, but because the politics demanded it. Here's what nobody talks about. Those reactors represented reliable, low-carbon baseload power. The kind of electricity that flows whether the wind blows or not. Germany replaced them with hope and gas turbines. Lots of gas turbines. And where does gas come from? Well, about 60% of it came from one country. One country that would later demonstrate it had opinions about European foreign policy. When Russia invaded Ukraine, Germany didn't just lose a supplier. It lost the foundational assumption of its entire energy system. By summer 2022, Germany was in crisis mode. The government triggered its emergency gas plan. Wholesale electricity prices didn't just rise, they exploded to nearly 6 times their pre-crisis levels. Industry started rationing. Factories that had operated for generations suddenly faced a choice: cut production or close entirely. You want to know something darkly ironic? Under Germany's emergency rules, if gas runs short, industry gets cut off first. Households and hospitals are protected, which sounds humane until you realize what it actually means. The chemical plants, the steel foundries, the glass manufacturers, the auto suppliers, they're the first sacrifice. The backbone of German prosperity becomes the designated victim of German policy. The system wasn't designed to protect industry. It was designed to protect politicians from angry voters. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. By late 2022, surveys showed nearly a third of German companies were considering relocation. Not, hypothetically, actively. By 2024, that number climbed to 37%. Think about what that means. More than 1 in 3 German industrial firms looking at the door, wondering if maybe operations in Texas or China or anywhere with cheaper energy might be a better idea. BASF, the world's largest chemical company, logged losses in Germany while simultaneously announcing a $10 billion plant in China. Volkswagen slashed investments at home while expanding abroad. These aren't small businesses making emotional decisions. These are the giants of German industry doing cold math and concluding that the math no longer works. The tragedy isn't that this happened. The tragedy is that anyone paying attention could have seen it coming. Now, let's talk about what nobody wants to discuss: the invisible machinery that made this crisis inevitable. Germany operates as a single electricity price zone, which sounds technical until you understand what it means. Wind farms in the north can generate cheap power, but the transmission lines to move that power south barely exist. So everyone pays based on the most expensive producer, usually gas. The North subsidizes the South, consumers subsidize the gaps, and the whole system obscures who's actually paying for what. Then there's the regulatory labyrinth: carbon taxes, grid fees, renewable surcharges, emissions caps, a complexity so dense that even the companies paying these costs struggle to trace where the money goes. Energy-intensive industries get exemptions, but small businesses don't. The burden falls unevenly, invisibly, and always on whoever has the least political leverage. Who designed this system? Committees, coalitions, decades of compromises between environmentalists and industrialists, between federal ambitions and state resistance. Nobody's fingerprints are clearly on it, which means nobody can be blamed, which is, of course, the point. So, what's the damage? Let's count it. Industrial output in 2024 sat at barely 90% of where it was a decade earlier. GDP contracted 2 years running. The trade surplus that defined German prosperity shrank to less than half its previous size. The government launched a 500 billion euro emergency fund, a number so large it would have been unthinkable under Germany's previous fiscal orthodoxy. And here's the part that should terrify you if you live anywhere in Europe. When Germany sneezes, Europe catches a cold. That's not a metaphor. That's economic reality. German factories buy components from Eastern European suppliers. German consumers buy goods from across the continent. German tax revenues fund EU budgets. When Germany's engine stalls, the whole convoy slows down. The cost isn't just German, the cost is European. And it's still being calculated. But here's what doesn't make the headlines. The hidden cost of this crisis isn't measured in euros or megawatts. It's measured in choices that will never be made. Every factory that relocates doesn't just take jobs, it takes the ecosystem of suppliers, the training programs for workers, the institutional knowledge built over generations. Once a chemical complex moves to Louisiana or a battery plant opens in Hungary instead of Bavaria, that capacity doesn't come back. Industrial capability isn't a light switch. You can't just flip it on again when energy prices stabilize. Germany is learning what America's Rust Belt learned decades ago. Deindustrialization is a one-way door. You can walk through it. You cannot walk back. All right, let me hit you with the fast version. Nuclear exits created a gap. Gas filled that gap. Russia controlled the gas. The war cut the gas. Prices exploded. Industry started leaving. Government printed money to patch the damage. And now everyone's pretending this wasn't predictable from the start. Here's the uncomfortable truth that sits underneath all of this. Germany's crisis wasn't caused by the Ukraine war. The war was the match. The kindling had been stacked for 20 years. The house was built to burn. Policymakers chose ideology over redundancy. They chose political convenience over industrial security. They bet the entire manufacturing economy on the assumption that hostile foreign powers would always honor their contracts. And when that assumption proved catastrophically wrong, they blamed circumstances instead of choices. The official story is bad luck. The real story is bad design. And the difference between those two explanations is the difference between a lesson learned and a lesson repeated. Germany's energy experiment will be studied for decades, not as a model, as a warning. A case study in how the world's fourth largest economy systematically dismantled its own competitive advantage, one good intention at a time. Before you go, I want to ask you one final question, and I genuinely want to hear your answer in the comments. If you were running Germany's energy policy tomorrow, not with ideology, not with politics, but with cold pragmatism, what's the single decision you would make first? What would you prioritize? I want to know what you think. Thanks for watching. If this video made you think, even if it made you uncomfortable, consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next one.